Hello there! It's been a while, hasn't it? Almost 2 years actually. But here I am, back at it for better or for worse, and I have a lot of content for you guys to prepare and edit, but until then, I'd like to focus on finishing this playthrough, because this was the first one that I recorded, and chronologically, it kinda makes sense. The goal of these series is not to record and present a linear story, but my thinking and decision-making process along the way. This is perfectly reflected in episode 3, but let's be honest, I did not do it justice in episodes 4 and 5, which is why you get a short recap of what happened. The previous recordings were mostly recorded real time, meaning my varying quality and frequent voice changes is the result of me speaking while recording. Sometimes it's early in the morning, sometimes it's the middle of the night where I sit and question my life decisions playing Supremacy while intoxicated in most cases. I did this because I wanted to record my genuine reaction to the events and how my thought process changes along the way. This is not just for you, but also for me as well, because if you think about it, Supremacy is like chess, except instead of turns, the game never stops. There's so many moves to make and so many possibilities, and I'm tired of forgetting them, so I recorded them to honor the memory of time wasted by me and other players on the map. So if you'd like to skip the recap, just go to the time displayed on the screen and let's just jump into it. In episode 2, a lot happened. After making an alliance with Russia to secure my northern borders, I saw them fail miserably versus the Scandinavian alliance. They did this primarily by boosting forts up north with gold, allegedly, because there's no actual way of determining it, and after being defeated, I promised Russia that I would do my best to avenge them and defeat the enemy up north. I treated Arabia as a potential enemy at this time because I did not know where they would expand, and their most logical route at the time was expanding up north into the Ottoman lands. After speaking with them, however, I changed my mind, so kudos to Arabia player and his diplomacy skills as well as his understanding of global map and politics, which a lot of players don't have, to be honest. Attacking Austria-Hungary was crazy even by my standards because honestly, look at the map. What the hell am I doing, and why do I look like a colonial country expanding into territories I have no access to or to do anything with? It was at this point where I made my first contact with Spain and put a plan into motion to defeat them a few weeks ahead. In episode 3, I already had a grudge on Spain for taking off Austria-Hungarian lands from me. Looking back, however, their decision was logical and understandable, so well done on their part. It was at this point that I realized how weak and exposed I was due to my country being split into two and me having no direct land access to my lands without going through Romania. When I realized how dependent I was on an ally that was inactive and unreliable, I decided to take them out as fast as possible and with as minimal losses as possible. At the same time, Lithuania was struggling to hold off and defeat the Scandinavian alliance, so it was race against time for me to help them, and I needed to make sure I was strong enough and secure enough, otherwise it would have been a suicide mission. In episodes 4 and 5, I focused on defeating Romania with minimal losses and as fast as possible, while also speaking to Lithuania to help him win the war up north. This, however, did not go as planned, and soon Lithuania was wiped before I could even finish off Romania properly. Afterwards, I felt secure because Sweden and Norway had to go through Ukrainian AI to attack me, but that all changed once I accidentally got into war with Ukraine, meaning that I had to defeat them while setting up my defensive lines with forts to strategically control the roads. So, because I didn't record the audio for these clips for some reason, I'll be talking over them and trying to remember what happened. Day 19 started with an unexpected war with Ukraine, which basically cut me off from my western lands and threatened all the progress that I have made so far. My objective at this point was to 1. Minimize my infantry losses by using as much artillery, tanks and armored cars as possible, 2. Delay Sweden and Norway from attacking me, and 3. Attack Spain as soon as possible because they're expanding into Africa fast and are becoming unbeatable, or as they say, snowballing. To do this, I devised a plan to involve Sweden into a war with Ukraine. I did this by using diplomacy, convincing Sweden to attack and take most of Ukrainian lands, while I only took the essential provinces to connect my lands and set up defensive lines against Sweden and Norway's future attacks. This was also advantageous because I would not have to fight entire Ukrainian army by myself. Sweden would lose some units fighting Ukraine, and I would delay me bordering Sweden for a while fighting Spain. This would also give me some time to build forts and set up defensive lines. I also wanted to touch on the challenge that I set for myself here. In this playthrough I wanted to use 0 gold marks and no high command to prove to new players that you don't have to use pay to win mechanics to win games. At this point of the game I used 0 gold marks. Arabia however decided to use gold to reveal Spanish troops, and because he shared his intelligence with me I was able to see Spanish troops as well. While I always try to tell players not to spend gold, I can only control what I can do, and hey, as they say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Don't get me wrong, by the way, I want the developers to make money from their work and I want to support the game, but from my experience as a child or back in the day, I can say that not everyone can afford to spend money on games that they want to enjoy. So that was also the motivation for this challenge actually. Because it was more or less a message to my younger self saying, hey, you can do this. You don't need money or gold or to give up while things are looking shit, you know. Just push on, try your best, and you'll win the game. Now let's get back to the commentary. It was obvious at this point that Spain was already outnumbering me in troops and artillery. I did have some advantages however, but taking a look at the amount of provinces I had and he had, we're more or less equal, and I had to be very smart in my movements and decisions. You can see me making here basic movements with artillery and tanks, placing infantry in the front, trying to minimize my losses by attacking smaller stacks with my larger stacks, but it didn't always work out so great, as you can see. Now, there's not a lot I can add here, but I'll just run through what I was doing. As I said, I had to minimize my losses and my movements were less than optimal, to be honest. I used the basic strategy of dragging AI out of their forts by using my artillery and placing tanks or infantry in front of them, and I also didn't engage high-level forts directly until my artillery took them out. At this point I had enough time and security, or I felt at least secure from Spain side or Norway and Sweden side, because my borders up north, yeah, they were exposed from Norway's attacks, but I had few or small forts up there that were almost level 5 at this point, as you can see, and I could see Spanish troops moving back and forth, so I knew they were not a direct threat. That's why I also don't have any troops in Greece, as you can see, and most of my armies are up north here, trying to minimize the losses. I also missed this function where it showed you how many troops your artillery killed, and I think it's important to note here that this is an older version of Supremacy. I recorded this 2 years ago, like the first time I made the tutorial, and that's why it looks a bit different maybe. I also wasn't as active and couldn't check in always, so you can see me making some mistakes here or not using advantages that I have. The map was more or less looking the same. I had a simple plan to connect the basic line up north, so southern Ukraine. It's a difficult topic to talk about right now, but it's a game, it's a strategy game, and I don't know what else to say. You can also see me here already making a mistake with Crimea by not defending it properly, and yeah, you will see me later suffer for it even more. I used heavy tanks here as much as possible, and to be honest, they're a really good tool for clearing infantry or even high-level forts. Every new unit I produced went up north. I had to be strategic about it. I also had to be strategic about my infantry morale, because I couldn't combine low morale troop with high morale troops, because that would basically degrade my army and I would be a lot weaker fighting Spain later on. At some point I also started moving artillery towards Spain, because when Sweden started moving in towards Ukraine I was feeling more or less secure, and I wanted to save as many hours as possible when it came to moving to Spanish borders. I also knew that if I started moving towards Spanish borders directly after I was done with Ukraine, they would tell something is up and they would have more time to prepare for it. I'll also later in this episode give you an example of what was happening in Africa, but for now let's focus on Europe. Up north, I already took the main province that I wanted to take. Again, this province is not really needed or necessary for me to capture, but I wanted to control these roads, because controlling the roads here was the main strategy. If I could control the main roads and set up a defensive line, I would be able to delay Norway and Sweden from attacking up north while I take out Spain and his core provinces, and then go back to focusing on Norway and Sweden. I honestly don't know why I didn't take Norway and Sweden as a bigger threat here, but I didn't. I also started building second defensive lines because I was not feeling optimistic at all in this game, but I was just pushing through because, as I always say, never give up, never surrender.
No, never give up, never surrender.
you see me here again using the basic strategies that I think I already told in my tutorials, but this is how I play or record my games. I also started constructing my first battleship in this case, and I called it Big Daddy 9000 because why not? What's the worst that can happen, right? Foreshadowing. The map was also looking interesting. You might notice me never talking about Americas because they're never really that important or involved, and I'm actually surprised that they're not landing in Europe at this point. Not a lot was changing in the map. It was still looking like 3 against 1 or 2 in this case because Arabia was my ally, but they would not be able to support me up north versus Sweden, Norway, and Spain. I lost Crimea. I tried to land there. I don't know why I was rushing it at this point. I was feeling a bit nervous about Sweden and Norway at this point because they still didn't attack Ukraine, and I did see some movements up north. So I was basically gambling, you know? I was basically gambling. And this brings us to a short recap to what happened in Africa. I shared maps with Libya finally to see what was going on and maybe give some advice, but they didn't really take it. Arabia, even though he had some troops, some opportunities and artillery, didn't really play well. As I remember, he was a new player, and Spain basically outplayed him there. I tried to help as much as possible. I looked there every now and then, but at this point my mental health was declining. I was being hopeless. And as you can hear in the following recordings, I really didn't know what to do, and I was just hoping for the best, to be honest. Because things here are not doing so good. I have wasted armies, and I made a mistake by not helping the allies because I wanted to be solo. Because I was greedy and going for this for old time's sake. So, these guys haven't attacked yet. This guy has not moved a thing. Although he did build a fortress here. I'm kinda weak, but my level 5 fort should hold them back for a while. Still have 3 artillery here. I'll have a fort here soon. I'm gonna, as soon as the next day starts, I'll take the capital, and after that I'm gonna wait and see what happens. I hope they attack. As soon as they attack, I'm gonna invade Spain because yeah, this is not looking good. I hope he can defend the crossing. Alright, here's a cruiser. I lost my cruiser. I'm ashamed. I am ashamed. I'm ashamed of this. I lost my cruiser. But yeah, I'll have a battleship soon, and I'll have a bomber soon. Yeah, things are looking up, my friends. Things are looking up. But I should. Lithuania is completely gone. It's basically us versus the whole world. When I talk, it sounds like there's like sponge stuck in my throat or something like that. Huh. And that was all the audio I had left over for these days, but in all honesty, I think it worked out great. I managed to connect the lands that I wanted to connect. I took south of Ukraine. I was already building up my provinces and had high morale in most of them, and up north I already had forts secured. So all I had to do was to wait for the day to finish and take the Ukrainian capital. Now, I don't remember why I took the capital after the day change. I think it would have been better if I did it before it, but it is what it is. And this concludes day 21 and start of day 22, which will be discussed in the next episode. Alright, so a quick summary of current situation. I finally managed to connect my lands here, allowing me to transport my troops freely on land and not having to depend on this crossing right here. This also allowed me to set up or complete my first line of defense, which would basically slow down Norway's and Sweden's attacks in case they tried to invade from up north. I was relatively secure from the Russian borders because there's a lot of land to travel there, so the movement speed is a lot slower. And because of this, I was building my second line of defense here because because I was not very sure this first line would hold up, because main Swedish army would be here after they were done with Ukraine. My strategy at this point was to, as I said, set up the defensive lines and attack Spain as fast as possible. I wanted to do this because, one, Spanish core provinces are here and here, because those were the earliest ones he took. That meant that most of his production or factories would be here. Second, if I lost against Spain, these provinces were not as important to me as my core provinces. And another strategy was that I had my main armies here and almost no army in this location, because these were my core provinces, and in case my defenses failed up north, I would be able to produce new army to resupply this line right here. So this place would act as a chokehold for the northern armies while I tried to take out Spain. As for Africa, I wanted Arabia to set up a chokehold over here, preventing Spain from landing in Arabian provinces, and this would give me basically security on this border, and I would not have to set up a defensive line here. As for the Americas, I have no clue what these guys were doing. They just were sitting there. I didn't even consider them for most of the war for some reason. And yeah, they didn't even invade UK or anything at this point. They're just sitting there. I also didn't want them to invade, and that was because I didn't want them to take the provinces that I would work so hard for. So if I took out Spanish troops here and then the Americans came in, I would have basically wasted my troops, wasted Spanish troops, and they would take all the provinces. Anyways, this was the strategy. I hope it makes some sense. It was very risky because it depended on movement, timing, and on the good grace or on the relationship and diplomacy with these two, mainly Sweden because he was more active. Anyways, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I promised, or I said I would try to make one video a week. I don't know how realistic that is. I won't make any specific promises, but that's my goal. I will be editing this playthrough until the end, and after that I'm going to make smaller videos, maybe even in between, and at some point start my other playthroughs that I have recorded for you. Please leave a comment if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want some more. Yeah, I know, classic. And yeah, as always, don't forget to enjoy the game and have a good time.